everyone, how's it going? Welcome to today's Wild Rift video. In this video, I'm going to be answering all your questions about my settings. There's been a lot of comments on my streams and also YouTube videos about what's my button layout, what settings do you use, what settings do you recommend. So I'm going to be going through every single setting on Wild Rift and give you my recommendations to help you when playing Wild Rift. So let's get things started with the settings. The first one is in-game chat. This is pretty much personal preference. I like to go for all game chat because I like to sometimes speak to the enemy if I notice someone or if I recognize someone on the enemy team. I like to talk with them. Most of the time I do recommend to just keep it on team chat or even just party chat so that you can just talk with your friends. Chat is not really that important. You know, you've got pings, you've got ways of just moving around the map and knowing where, you know, your team is or where the enemy team is. Chat is not really needed. You know, most of the time the chat is just a really toxic place, so most of the time you can just keep it to party and just stick with yourself and just play your own game. Team chat is okay, means you don't get chat from the enemy team, and then all chat is obviously all chat. You get talking from the enemy team and also your team at the same time. Frame rate, now obviously this is again personal preference. Some devices might go up to 120 FPS. My device doesn't, unfortunately. I play on the iPhone 12 Pro Max. I would always recommend going for the higher FPS though. If this means that your graphics quality has to go lower, then so be it. Graphics quality is not the big thing, but FPS is really important, even for a mobile game and even for a MOBA like Wild Rift. It's really important to get high FPS so the game feels smoother and then your gameplay feels smoother, so you can react quicker, you can auto attack easier, everything like that as well. So I always recommend to go for the highest FPS possible, and if your phone struggles with that, then try and just bump your graphics qualities down to lowest, which I'll talk about a bit later on. Scoreboard is full screen or half screen. Again, personal preference. This is a full screen scoreboard. Obviously it covers your entire screen, but if you feel like that you use your scoreboard, you know, in the middle of a team fight, for example, or something like that, or you prefer this view, you can go for this as well. This is just half screen. You can see all the numbers and everything there are for half screen. And then, but I like to keep it full screen because I'm used to it from PC League of Legends. PC League of Legends used to look like this as well. Not used to look like this, but does look like this. Sorry, it's because I used to play PC League of Legends. So yeah, that's just again personal preference, whatever you prefer to use. Character inking. Now I quite like character inking. It does like a little outline around the character models. It's pretty good, to be fair. It means that, I mean, it may have impact performance, but showing an outline around champions I think is a cool thing. You can see around Garen there's like a little outline. You can see around me as well, there's a little bit of an outline around me. Just makes things a little bit clearer. You can just see, you know, the champions a little bit clearer. You can see the models a little bit clearer as well at the same time. So I think the you know, I think it's completely fine. I think character inking is pretty good, and to be honest, I haven't really seen the impact. You know, it says may impact performance. Again, it's not really necessary. If you turn it off, again, you don't really see that much difference, but you can see that there's a little bit of outline around the champions. It just makes things a little bit clearer. Right, for the next setting, if I can click the settings button, screen shake, just turn this off, please. Just turn this off. Screen shake, it enhances the visuals of some abilities by simulating a screen shaking of it. No, you do not want screen shaking at all. No, screen shaking is always a downside to any game you play. Doesn't matter if it's FPS, doesn't matter if it's a MOBA, you do not want screen shaking. Screen shaking means that your eyes just pretty much go over the place and they get confused because your screen starts shaking. Turn this off. Just completely turn this off. Map brightness, completely personal preference. Fog of war brightness as well, completely personal preference. Floating text, make sure you have this on. Displays damage numbers when dealing damage to enemies and may impact performance. This is when you auto attack champions. You can see here that damage numbers come up, so you see 55 every single time. If I turn the floating text off, you're not going to be able to see these numbers at all. But it's really important to make sure that you have these numbers up and available, so not only you can see how much damage you're taking, but also you can see how much damage you are dealing, to see, you know, if you could deal enough damage to a champion maybe. And also it helps you a little bit as well when last hitting minions, so make sure you have this on. Champions outlined at the edge of screen. This is like a little red basically outline that happens on the outer edge of the screen. You can see team colored champions outlines are displayed when champions are near the edge of the screen. So you see Garen here. If I go near the edge of the screen, you can see Garen has a little bit of a red outline. I go closer to him, he doesn't. Again, personal preference, but I quite like it because sometimes you might not be able to see the champion. Sometimes you might see, you know, a little bit like this, but I know that that's an enemy because that's red. And if that's blue, then I know that's a teammate. That means I can walk closer towards that person. So making sure you have that is quite important. Again, it may affect performance, but again, I haven't really felt the impact myself. So it's, you know, you can see here it's red. So when I'm walking up to the lane, if you're not used to, you know, using the mini map and keep an eye on champions this way, you can just keep an eye on champions when you walk into the lane to see which one's red and which one's blue, to see if it's an enemy or an ally. So again, completely personal preference, but I quite like it and I do recommend it. Health bar name displays, again, whatever you prefer. I've got it on play at the moment because I've been spectating some esports games, so you know, player names are really important above the names. I normally use champion. I like to have the champion names above them. This is really good if you're kind of a beginner in the game as well, to have champion names above the champions, so you can get used to, you know, what champions look like, what skill they use, everything like that. I always recommend to go for champion names above, because someone might not know who Xayah looks like, and Xayah comes walking towards you, and then you're like, oh, who's this champion? I've only got, you know, the player name above it. And then once you get used to the game, you can then swap and maybe change to like player or something like that. But if you're new to the game, 100% recommend going for the champion. I keep clicking on the leaderboard instead of the setting, keep the champion name display for now, because then you'll get used to it over time. You'll get used to what champion is what champions do what abilities, and then if you get used to it, then you can go back to player. But 100% recommend champion. Dual connection, this is basically if you don't really have the best Wi-Fi, you can use dual connection and it will use your 3G or 4G, or basically your mobile network as well. It does trigger reconnect, but as you can see, enables mobile and Wi-Fi to reduce latency. So it basically includes both at the same time. So if your Wi-Fi drops, it will instantly go to 3G or 4G, for example. Or if Wi-Fi is not as good as 3G and 4G, then it'll swap between the two. I don't have this because my Wi-Fi is completely fine, and most of the time I don't lag or nothing happens, so Wi-Fi is completely fine for me. But if you don't have the best Wi-Fi connection, and if you don't want to have lag in game, 100% recommend to turn this on. Because like I said, if your Wi-Fi gets really slow at some points during the day, then it will swap automatically on to your 3G or 4G or your mobile network. Simplify announcements. This is just whatever, really. I think it just basically, it's just simplified announcement options on the side of the screen. Basically doesn't really mean too much. In the simplified option, most kill announcements and pings banners will appear in a chat box on the left in a more combat form. So instead of it popping up in the middle of the screen, it normally happens in the middle of the screen at the top. Instead of that, it's going to pop up on the left hand side instead. Again, kind of personal preference. Some people might like the simplified option, so then it doesn't cover your screen in front of you, but to be honest, I don't really recognize it that much. Display minimap health bars. This is really important. This was actually a feature that Wild Rift added a while ago, but they actually turned it off by default. So make sure you turn this on. This is basically when enemies or when allies are low on health, you'll see it on the minimap. So for example, I mean, you can't really see it on the minimap because there's so many target dummies, but if this Garen was low on health, if I looked at it on the minimap in the top left hand corner, I can see how low health he is if I have vision on him. This is really good if you're playing champions like Lux, like Senna, and if you see that your allies or if the enemies are low, then you can use your global ultimates to try and snipe and kill, or even try and save your allies if you realize that they are low on health. Yeah, all the time, 100% recommend to turn this on. Right, on to controls. This is my button layout. Again, most of the time I say this is personal preference. I quite like both the summoner spells being at the bottom. I always have the flash on the right and the second one on the left, because flash will then be closer to my movement, so I can just quickly go from my attack, to the flash as soon as possible. And then the second summoner spell is just to the left of that, and just above that is my boots upgrade. Again, it's the closest and easiest way for my right thumb to move from the attack button to the Zhonya's if I ever need to click on it. And then my trinket is right at the top. You can see all my abilities are default. Minion and tower buttons are all default. The Portrait lock is all default. Everything else is pretty much all default. Like I said, the only thing I really changed is the flash, the 2 summoner spells, the boots upgrade, and also the trinket, which is at the top. But if you want to copy it, feel free. You can have it. You can do a copy if you want to. I can quickly click on all the buttons so you can see the positions. But again, it's all personal preference, whatever you like to go with. But I'll just quickly click on all the buttons so you all can see my positions of everything. So that's pretty easy and self-explanatory. Nothing really too crazy there. Portrait lock. I like to have a portrait display. I don't really like the fixed display, because the fixed display basically means that in position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they're always going to show up in that position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Whereas priority display always puts the priority basically in the middle. You can see here, it's a great explanation here. Priority display sequence of the enemy icons follows the sequence in which they appear in the next attack vision. So you can see Annie is the closest, then it's Twisted Fate and Vayne on either side. Whereas if you go for the other one, then it's dependent on the order of the champions. So for now, I've got priority. So when I walk towards Garen is always going to be here. Garen is always going to be in the middle. But if I change this to fixed display, I mean, it's always going to be in the middle because he's the only champion. But say he was like here, for example, then it'd be different. It'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's all the numbers. And you can see the numbers when you go onto here. So you can see 1 is in the middle. It goes 2, 3, 4, 5. So it just depends on the position of the leaderboard. So yeah, most of the time I like to see that the closest ally is in the middle. Again, it's in the middle. I know it's in the middle, and I know I always need to click on the middle when the closest ally is there. So again, it's all about making sure that you have something that you feel comfortable with. If you're comfortable and if you easily recognize that it just goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you know which champion is which number, then cool. But obviously that's going to change every single game. So I think keeping it consistent, keeping the priority lock is really, really important. General targeting priority, I always do low health percentage. To be honest, I just kept this default. I don't really like, I mean, low health absolute tap casting or abilities or attacks prioritize a champion with the least amount of health in range. Yeah, cool. Tap casting an ability or a tap priority is the champion with the lowest percentage of health remaining visually, basically. And then you have closest, which tap casting ability or attack prioritizes the closest champion. I always go for low health percentage. You can go for closest as well. Closest is not too bad if you're going for like a front to back AD carry like Xayah, for example, where you always want to attack the first champion anyway. But most of the time I use portrait lock on it anyway. I either use portrait lock to make sure I'm focusing the right champion, or I use my attack button so I know which champion I'm attacking every time. I always do this when I'm switching between targets. I always like to move my attack button to make sure that I'm focusing the right target every time. Whereas if I just auto attack normally, then obviously it's always going to focus on the target that has the lowest health. Basically, that's all it is. But again, personal preference, I like to go for low health percentage. But like I said, most of the time I manually like to attack the right champion at the right time, depending on where I am, what position I'm in, and what champions are in front of me. Force attack follow, turn this off. You do not want this on at all. This is awful. Automatically moves your champion towards out of range targets. No. Turn this off straight away. This is awful. You don't want this at all. You basically just want to make sure that you're auto attacking all the time with your attack button. You don't have to care about follow or everything, because the problem is that if you follow an ally and if the ally has CC, then you're just walking straight into the CC and there's nothing else you can really do about it. This is basically if like you're AFK and it's just going to automatically follow that same target. You don't want this. Turn this off completely. Dash and move direction. I actually quite like this. This basically means whatever position that you have your movement ability in, it will mean that is where the dash will be. Let me swap to a champion that this will make more sense. Let me swap to probably to Ezreal. Ezreal is a good option. So with Ezreal, if I have my third ability, when I'm using my third ability, you can see that when I'm using my ability, as I move around my movement stick, my bottom left hand movement stick, my third ability also moves. I'm not moving my third ability at all. You see, that's completely still. So my arcane shift will go in whatever direction the movement stick is. So if my movement speed is down here, boom, it goes to there. If it's up here, boom, I'll go up here. But if you have this turned off, that means you have to manually aim every single time. So if I turn this off, that means that if I move behind me, and if I do this, then I have to manually aim it every single time. And it can be quite difficult at times to be able to do it. But I think, like I said, you know, dash and move direction is quite important. You have to make sure you manually aim it if you turn it off. And I think it's quite good because when you're peeling back, when you're walking back, you can just use this and, you know, go backwards like that. Again, you can see it here. You know, all non-hovering dash and blink effects casting towards the movement of movement ability when tapped. Or most when you turn it off, most dashes and blinks abilities will prioritize casting towards in-range targets when tapped. Again, you don't want that to happen. You don't want like a Tryndamere automatically dashing towards a full health Garen, for example. That's not what you want. You know, if you're kiting back, if you're moving backwards, you want to make sure that you're dashing backwards because you probably want to go away to safety. You can still manually move the abilities as well, even though you're moving. So I can still, you know, move around and manually cast my third ability. That will be completely fine. But it just means that whatever direction you move will be exactly where your tap ability will be. That's basically it. For dash in move direction, lock target system. Dragging the attack button allows you to select a target and lock into them. Modify this feature with these settings. So all of them basically means any type of enemy can be selected. This is when you're moving around with your attack button. You can prioritize no minions or structures if you want to. This is really good if you like to use the attack turret button. You can see that here, if I walk up over here, I can't prioritize this tower at all. I can't move towards this tower, so the only way I can really attack the tower or the minions is by using the tower button, which is the one just above the attack button, and the minion one, which is just below. But I like to keep it on all because sometimes I like to move my attack button and focus on towers and focus on minions. Most of the time, I don't really use the tower or minion buttons unless there's enemies nearby. Or you can have this off completely. It's completely up to you, whatever you want to. No enemies could be selected, so you can no longer drag the attack button. I don't really recommend that. I think dragging the attack button is actually pretty helpful to make sure that you target and you lock onto the right champion or the right minion as well. There could be loads of other things, you know, making sure you CS easier in lane. Really, really nice. I like both targeting priority. This is basically any sort of shield. So if you're playing Lulu, for example, these are any sort of shields. So when you're on always self, every single time you tap the ability, the shield is always going to go on yourself. I think this is really, really important. You can change this if you're a support, and maybe when you tap it, it's always going to prioritize the ally with the lowest health percentage or the lowest health value. But I like to always keep it on myself. That means when I know, okay, so the thing is that when you're playing a champion like Lulu or a champion like Janna, every single time that I tap the ability, I know it's always going to go on myself 100% of the time. So when I want to trade during laning phase, for example, I always know that I can tap the ability, put it on myself. For example, like a Janna shield. I use a Janna shield on myself. I walk up and I auto attack. But if you have this on like low percentage or low absolute, when you tap the ability, it might go onto your ally instead, which is obviously not what you want at all. So making sure you always keep it on yourself is really nice. But if you struggle with aiming shields like Lulu shield and Janna shield, then you could definitely change this to low percentage or low health absolute. If you don't feel comfortable with moving your shield around and making sure that you focus your shield on an ally, for example. Again, all personal preference. All right, action buttons. You got default, drag and move. You got follow, and you have lock. So follow is same as default, but the movement speed follows your finger as you drag. And the locked is you tap the start moving, and then movement speed is locked on the screen. I always like default with the movement stick. It basically means anywhere on my screen I can use this. You can see here I can use this, and my movement will always be my movement stick will always go wherever my thumb is, my left thumb is. So I think this is quite good because when it is fixed or when it is locked, you know, you can see here, like I'm trying to click on the same position, but when it's locked, that means that you can only use your movement button where that lock space is. So if you go a little bit too far, a little bit out of space, that means that you're not going to be able to use it. So I'm tapping my thumb right now on the exact same spot as before, but it's not being able to get there. Default, for example, though, I can have my movement stick all the way up here. It's basically like a range or like a little radius. I can have my movement speed stick up here, and I can still move around. This is, I think, pretty good because, you know, most of the time you want to use your right thumb or your right finger, depending on how you play, to move the camera around, and then you always want your left thumb to be be getting a movement. This also means as well, every single time that you tap your left thumb in terms of movement, doesn't matter where you tap it, that will always be the middle, and then you can move left, right, up, down. So every single time I know that I'm pressing my left thumb down on the screen, I know that that is going to be the middle. So I know if I move it down, I'm going to go down. I know if I move it right, I'm going to move right. But if you have it locked, then it's a little bit more difficult. You can also have this as well, which follows. Again, this is just distraction at the end of the day. This is a distraction, and you don't really need this. You know, you can't be having a movement button follow around like this, because it's, again, it's like you could be worried that projectile is coming towards you, for example, or anything like that. But again, it's all personal preference. So I like to keep on default. Button aiming sensitivity. This is the aiming sensitivity when you're using drag abilities. I like to keep this on quite low, because I don't really like the crazy sudden movement of ability sometimes. I like to be quite precise with my abilities. I like to make sure that I'm using it, and I make sure I'm moving it in the right direction. So I normally have it on quite low. And yeah, the highest option is extremely high. I don't know what percentage I have it on. I think it's like 3%, but like the high percentage, look at this. Like I move my thumb a little bit and it just goes from one side to the other. Like look at how small the radius is now compared to before. So I don't really like that. I like to keep it down on 3%. So I have a bigger radius to move my thumb around. And again, it makes your abilities more precise. You don't have to rely so much on maybe quick movements with your thumb. You can just be precise with your abilities. Again, this is really good if you want to try and aim your first ability, for example, as Ezreal, and make sure you land it, because it's always going to be more precise. Your movement's going to be more precise, which means you're going to land more abilities. Action cancel method, I just keep this on default. It's basically always going to make sure that the position of where the cancel button is always in the exact same place. If you like to have your action button closer, then you can. But I know that my action button is always going to be in the top right hand corner every single time. It's always going to be in the exact same place. And again, it's more about consistency with these settings. It's about keeping your settings consistent and keeping remembering what to do and where to go and everything like that. So making sure that you have the position of your cancel button in the top right is quite good. Again, you can have this on alternative, but that means that the cancel button is always going to be up. And look, it could move every single time. So my cancel button is going to move every single time that I use the ability. If I use it up here, if I move my thumb a little bit too far, it's going to cancel the ability instead of using it. So I don't really like this at all. I much prefer default. That means I can use my first ability and move it around wherever I like, except for that top right hand position. Again, it's further away, but again, it's always about making sure that you have everything in the same spot so you remember it. That's always the way that I look at things. Joystick dead zone. This is basically when using an ability, attack or ability, you must exit the dead zone area in order to aim. That's basically all it is. It's just a dead zone that you need to exit to be able to aim it. So that means that like when I'm using the ability, I need to exit the dead zone to be able to aim it. I don't think there's that much to this setting, but I just kept it on default and it's worked completely fine for me every single time. Locked button cameras. I don't like this at all. Again, this is more of a thing of like the buttons. This button is in. Okay, so I said before that it's always important to keep the buttons in the same place, but it's a bit different when it comes to movement and abilities. You know, abilities, for example, you might be using ability in a certain position that may be, you know, is just a little bit above the button. You see here, a little bit above the button. You want to make sure that you click the ability, and having the zone in the exact same place every single time is a little bit difficult. Again, it's always about when you put your thumb down, you always know that you're going to be in the middle of that button. So I know, even if I use my third ability in the bottom right hand corner, I know that my middle is there. I know that my middle is always going to be there. However, if I change the setting and if I put it on locked button, it's always going to be in that same position. So that means that even if I use the ability in the top right, it's always going to be in that same position. I don't know. Again, it's all personal preference. This is just what I recommend. But I like to have it off to make sure that I know where my abilities are aiming, even though the circle is going to be in a different place every time. Again, when I use the ability, I know that my thumb is always going to be in the center. So when I move the ability, that goes there. Button layouts. I think this is just the default button layouts. I don't think there's anything here. This is just default button layouts to do with the customize these things. Yeah, that's all it is. It's just a button layout. I tried this at one point as well, but I didn't really like it. Yeah, default button layout. You can have as many as you want, I'm pretty sure. Again, it just depends what you want. So yeah, that's pretty much that one. On to the next setting. I think that is pretty much everything. Oh, ping button size. This is just the size of your pings. I don't really like to have it on 110 or 120% because they cover up quite a lot of the screen. As you can see, they cover quite a lot of the screen. So I like to just keep on default, especially the map as well. The map covers quite a lot, so I just like to keep it on 100, which is the exact same. Ping control. Now, there's a new ping system that they added in patch 3.4. You have the default setting, which I personally prefer. I like to still have, you know, enemy vision over here, group over here, enemy missing here. You know, that means I can make sure I can ping enemy missing the exact same spot and ping where I want to every single time. Yes, it takes a little bit longer, and yes, going all the way down to ability cooldown and pinging your ability is quite annoying to do. But with the 4-button setting, you can see that you've got a little button here in the bottom right hand corner, which basically automatically moves it to where you want to straight away, so you don't have to drag all the way down to the bottom and then do that. So if you want to prioritize pinging your abilities more often, and if you just want 3 pings, you know, danger, attack, and on my way, then you can go for this setting. But I think I much prefer the default setting, because then I have more options. Then I'm able to do ping missing. I'm able to do loads of other options, especially the missing ping is really, really important. The group one is really important. Enemy vision is also important. Like, all of these pings are very important for communication in the game. Right, onto camera. Aim panning. Pans the camera towards your aim location. Again, really important to turn this on when you're aiming ultimates like Lux Ulti, as you can see on screen. Aim panning will move your camera in the direction of where you're aiming. Now, this doesn't work with every single ability, it only works with long range abilities, but this means your camera is going to go a little bit further forward. So maybe if you want to try and land your ultimate on a champion that is a little bit further in front of you, but not too far in front of you, your aim panning will then increase the range basically of your camera. It means your champion will always be on the bottom of the screen. So if I turn this on, I use my ultimate, you can see that my pan is going to be on Garen. If I was over here, I couldn't see Garen, but now I can see Garen. I can see Garen, and maybe I can see his health bar. Here I can see his health bar. Here I can't see his health bar. So the panning actually helps you a little bit when trying to keep an eye on it. But when I turn it off, my ultimate is always going to stay in the middle. So I might not know what health Garen is on when I use my ultimate. So I quite like aiming panning. It makes sure that you have the panning option, so when you move this around, you can see the area around you, which is quite nice. Again, this works on other abilities as well. Like your first ability, you can see the panning works when I aim down the bottom. So I quite like to have this on. Camera height, you always want this on suggested. You always want this on high. Medium, having the camera closer to you is a no-go. Absolute no-go. Higher means that you can see more of the map. You can see more of champions around you. Yes, it doesn't make that big of a difference, but everything counts at the end of the day. Sometimes there's little things that make the big difference, but medium, closer in on the camera settings, I don't like that at all. Ability minimap cam. It applies to all long range abilities. So when you're using your Twisted Fate ultimate, for example, or something like a Ziggs ultimate, I think Ziggs is another great example, you're going to have a little ability map icon in the top left hand corner. And let me quickly change over to Ziggs. I actually don't know what order this thing is, and it is kind of triggering because I can't seem to find Ziggs. If this takes too long, then I will pretty much just leave it. But yeah, you basically have an ability icon in the top left hand corner when you're using abilities. I can't find Ziggs at all. I think it even works with True Shot Barrage. Actually no, it doesn't work with True Shot Barrage. Damn, where is Ziggs? Ziggs. There he is. There's the Bomberman. So yeah, when you have Ziggs, I'll give him a few levels. So when you use your ultimate, it doesn't matter where you use your ultimate. If you use it out of range, when you use your ultimate, you can see the ability camera in the top left hand corner. You can see it there. I think this is quite useful to see maybe how low enemies are on health, maybe to see if you get a kill or not. Or maybe you could use this to follow up afterwards. Because with Ziggs, maybe, for example, you want to ulti the mid wave. And if you realize that they're low on health, you can use this to maybe satchel charge forward and move your bombs. It's all about visuals. It's always about knowing how low your enemies is, if your ultimate is there. And it also grants you vision. Like, your ultimate grants you vision. So if you want to use this at the Elder Dragon, you can see that the Elder Dragon's HP. You can see how low the Elder Dragon is. You can see if anyone is around the Elder Dragon. So any sort of vision abilities like that, like the Ziggs ultimate, it's going to be really, really helpful. Again, I can see Baron, I can see Baron health at the same time. So I think it's always useful, and it's only in the top left-hand corner of the screen, so I don't think it takes up too much room there. Camera pan sensitivity, this is just personal preference. This is basically when you move your camera around with your right thumb. I like to have this lower, again, more precise. I don't like to have it really, really high, because most of the time I don't like to look that far ahead. I mainly use this to just look at the proximity close to me. Like, say I'm looking up towards here or down towards here, just close proximity, like that I'd like to look at. If I want to look further away, then I'm just going to use my mini map. My top left hand corner, I'm just going to use my mini map up here. So I think that's the best way to go. But again, personal preference to that. Semi-lock camera enables the camera to at a focus point. This is basically like a little eye that you can have up here. This permanently puts the camera in a semi-locked position, so you can move this to wherever you want to. You can move this all the way down here if you want to, and as you can see, it will permanently lock your camera in that position. To be honest, I never use this. I hardly ever use this. I don't think anyone would maybe see me use this, but I keep it up here anyway, just in case I want to use it. This is really good if you're staying under tower. If you want to get a little bit more vision further ahead in the lane, you can use this, which means that you can use your bombs more precisely and maybe attack the champions that you want to. If you don't use this, then maybe it's a little bit more difficult to try and aim your abilities towards maybe champions that are further behind. So it helps you out a little bit. I know quite a few people do use this, but most of the time I just keep it on default, but I have it there just in case I do want to use it. Definite spectate panning, it's just whatever really. Pans in the direction you drag. It's basically natural invert. It's just like, do you want the camera to move in a direction that you're moving, or do you want it invert? It's basically this whole conversation is like, is invert more important or is natural more important? You know, that big question. Right, utilities, minimap auto pathing. Now, this is a thing that a lot of people have asked me on the stream. How do you move without having fingers on your screen? Now, this is the big thing that is, you know, minimap auto pathing. That means that I can press on the minimap and I can move wherever I want to. I can press towards the Baron, and as you can see, there's a little line on the minimap, and that will show where I will move. This is really good when walking back to laning phase. You know, you can just go back to base if you want to move like this. This means you can use the shop at the same time. You can focus on buying items. When you walk back to lane as well, you can also focus on maybe looking at the leaderboard at this time. You can see maybe CS numbers, and you know you're not going to be under any threat that early on in the game, unless you're just really, really unlucky and the tower diving you at level 2 or something, but very unlikely. But it means you can do other things at the same time. And if you turn this off, this means that when you press, it's always just going to look at the minimap instead. So you're never going to be able to move around in the minimap. It's always going to pan towards the camera. I like to have this on. I think it's really, really good. Quick cast and power attacks. This is basically for like Nasa's first ability. If you have an ability that basically can auto attack straight away, instead of being able to press ability and then auto attack afterwards, when you use the ability, it's just going to auto attack straight away. Again, Nasus is the best option for this. To explain this, again, if I can find Nasus, I don't know what order these things are in. This is so confusing what order these are in. There's Nasus. If I have Nasus, if I have my first ability, if I have this setting on, that means when I use my first ability, it will auto attack straight away, and I don't have to worry about auto attacking afterwards. But if I turn the setting off, that means that when I use the first ability, I need to auto attack to make sure I trigger this ability. So again, it's just if you want to focus on using your first ability as an auto attack, if you want it to automatically attack, or at range, what I like to normally do, again, this is about being more precise. I like to use my first ability and then use my attack button and make sure I drag to the right champion. Or the right minion, for example, because sometimes if you have this setting on, say I want to attack this target dummy over here, when I use my first ability and I'm trying to target that, trying to focus on that target dummy, it might focus on somewhere else instead. Wait, did I even turn the setting on? I did turn the setting on, my bad. But I would say I want to attack the target dummy here. If I use my first ability, look, it's just going to always go towards the bot straight away, unless I'm within, you know, range. It basically focuses on whatever is closest. You can see here, I'm standing quite close to the target dummy, but look, it's always going to go back to the Garen bot. So again, it's more about being precise and making sure you attack the right enemy at the right time. Again, this could be really important during team fights. You could use your first ability and also attack the wrong champion. So again, all personal preference. Level up suggestions, I never have this on. I know what abilities I need to max. I know what abilities I need to go. So again, nothing too crazy with that. Level ups, I mean, you can have this on if you want to. It will just show you the best choice. It'll be like highlighted. It will show you the best choice. Auto level up, never have this on. Completely turn this off. Instant 10 seconds, turn this off completely. You do not want to instantly level up. Like, sometimes the default might be the wrong way to level up your ability, so always turn this off and make sure you follow my guides and everything to know what the ability orders should be. And never turn this on. Never. Ward aiming assist, again, never turn this on. Again, this is about me being more precise. At the moment with my ward, I can place it wherever the hell I want, but if I have ward aiming assist on, it means it's always going to focus. Look at that. Like, I'm every single time it's always going to focus towards the bush. Say I want to put a ward like over here, for example, you can see that the ward is always trying to force me to go into the bush. If I'm not near a bush, then it's fine, but look, if I do it near the bush, that means it's always going to be in the bush. So I always have this on to be more precise with my walls to make sure I can do it. Ping magnifier, fixed or follow your finger. Again, it's just whatever. I mean, it doesn't really make too much of a difference. You can kind of see what you're targeting if you want to go for this option, like if you want to ping the Elder Dragon or anything like that. But most of the time I like follow the finger because because when you have fixed, you can still see in the top left hand corner. You see in the top left hand corner, that's where the little magnifier is. So that is always going to be where I'm looking to see, to make sure I'm pinging the tower, to make sure I'm pinging the make sure I'm pinging the Elder Dragon or anything like that. If you want it to have follow on finger, again, be my guest. That's completely fine. But again, it's just more projectiles to look at, and it's just more distraction in a way, which is exactly what you don't want. So I always have this on fixed. I cast on button press. Some abilities that do not trigger aiming or targeting happen when the button is pressed rather than released. This is really good. So for example, what is a good example for this? I can go back to Xayah. I think Xayah is a great option because Xayah's second ability is a really good option for this. So basically for Xayah's second ability, at the moment, if you have this off, it will always activate when you release. So when I press the button, it's not going to activate straight away. It activates when I release my thumb from my phone. However, if I have this on, that means that when I press the button, it's going to happen straight away. So this makes the activation of the ability quicker. Every single time it makes the activation quicker when you press the button. So I think that is very important to make sure you have the cast on button press on. Sound is just sound, it's whatever. Play all announcer voices, call, announcement pings. If you want that on, you can have that on. To be honest, I don't even need announcer voice lines on, but I have it on anyway because I like it when it says welcome to Wild Rift. You know, if you find that annoying, you can turn it off. Again, these are all my preferences in terms of sound. But that's basically it. Cool. So that's basically everything in the game with my settings. I have a few settings to show you outside of the game, kind of in the main menu if you want to have a look at that in terms of graphic settings and everything. So we can have a quick look at that. These are my general settings. These are just, again, personal preference. Display match result, allow other users to see your close friends, display achievements, blah blah blah, all this sort of stuff and everything. This is everything you want. Again, if you want to be more enclosed, maybe you don't want a lot of people to see your profile, again, you can turn all this off or you can turn all of this on. It doesn't really matter. All right, graphics. These are my graphic settings. Again, I don't have 120 FPS because my device does not support this. My graphics settings on medium. I sometimes even put this on low if I feel like my phone is overheating a lot, but I just put this on medium. Again, resolution on medium, effects quality low. You can see that all my graphics quality is not the highest, but like I said before, it's so important to make sure that you go for the highest FPS possible on your phone. If that means that the game's going to look shit, so be it. You know, it's not going to make that much of a difference if you go for super high graphics quality or medium graphics quality. It's not going to make that much difference at all. Yeah, resolution is completely fine. There was a couple other things. Effects quality, again, I like to keep that on low. Post-processing, again, I completely turn this off. Doesn't really make that much of a difference if you turn it on or off. Again, I much prefer to go for the performance side of things with this rather than turning on. Again, will be applied to 3D models. Cool. I don't really care about that, to be honest with you. Interface animations. Again, it's just the interface animations. When you level up with the wild pass, for example, boom, a cool animation comes up. You don't really need that if you don't really want to. Dynamic resolution. I actually like to keep this on. This means that the resolution might get lower on your phone. So say if you do want to play on high settings, if your phone does get overheated, then the game will automatically change your resolution, which is optimal to your device. So I think this is quite good. I mean, actually it says there, it helps reduce heat and stutter problems caused by team fights. big W. I feel like turning this on is always very important. And then the last thing is the screen edge offset. You saw this a little bit before, but I like to keep this on default. If you keep this all the way down to the bottom, that means the screen is going to be, all the buttons are going to be closer to the middle. But I always like to keep this the furthest out as possible. To keep it as far away from the edge of the screen as possible, which means that I don't need to move my thumb as much. My thumb is always going to be at the edge of my screen. Everything else here you've already seen in game. Again, sound, this is all my sounds and everything. Other settings, if you want to have a look at this as well. Again, I've got dual channel connectivity off, download, call. These are all the buttons. Again, yeah, like I said, if you make this so the screen edge is bigger or smaller, sorry, that means it's going to be all crunched towards the middle, which I don't really like. Again, this is everything that I've showed you: block list, call, whatever, and playback. I never put on champion highlights. I think the big thing about champions highlights is that it's going to take more as you're playing the game. So I always just turn this off. Obviously I stream, I record. Obviously for some people, they don't have the equipment to be able to stream or record their games. So you could turn this on and maybe post some cool highlights. I'm not telling you to turn it off. But again, just be wary of your device that you're using. Some devices, when you turn champion highlights on, it means it's going to use more of your device, which means more overheating, which means more problems when you're playing the game. And that's pretty much everything. That is all my settings. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below in the comments. And as always, stay safe, and I'll see you all in the next Wilder video. Peace.